Hello. Thank you for listening. This is the near death experience of Anna, who is from Greece. And this event occurred May 29th and 30th of 2003. Open quote. The gush of blood that all of a sudden turned into an endless river soon turned into a sudden process of feeling very, very cold. I felt I was freezing, as if life itself was leaving me. I was shivering uncontrollably on a surgical bed, and the very dedicated doctors and nurses were trying their best to cover me with blankets and to keep talking to me. My doctor had left after a long lasting, difficult labor. She'd seen my son born. She'd seen me smile and feed him. She'd left the staff with instructions to check and see whether I'd be okay, considering there was no unusual bleeding during the labor, just the placenta and the baby. I heard them calling her and asking her to return. I had squeezed my eyes to the point of utter pain from the freezing that had overtaken every single limb, which I was sensing in such detail during those minutes. All of a sudden, I could only think of God and felt an urge to go, to let go. Then, slightly opening my eyes, the last thing I whispered to the nurse while grabbing the cross hanging from her neck, which was lying on my chest, "Do you believe in God?" She was engaged in saving me, but that second she turned to me, removed the necklace, and placed it inside my hand. That's when I started floating. I barely glanced at the overpacked surgery room. Emergency bells were ringing for my doctor. I saw her looking at my body and talking to it as I was hovering above, happy, healthy, excited. Before I knew it, I was sucked like from it by a vacuum cleaner into this wonderful pool of light. Even today, that pool is the most beautiful, most perfect thing I've ever experienced. For lack of a truly better word, I can't describe it as anything else but quote unquote thing. Yet the one word I'll address to the entire experience or journey would be reality, all quotes. That pool, all caps, that all caps place, that all caps event was the most real all caps thing that's ever happened to me. On that background, the life I'd been living on planet Earth was an insignificant second of an experiment which I'd volunteered for. The me, all caps, I wasn't Anna, the lady who'd just given birth, but it was a light being, light, all caps, in every sense. I was made of the same light as the one with which the pool was filled. I sensed everything, felt everything beautiful as there can ever be. I thought and understood everything and was floating around inside the pool happily, finally back home, all caps. Light, all caps, as in lightness, no gravity, no strings attached. I was so happy that I wouldn't have to sleep or eat anymore. No tiredness, no negativity, no anxieties whatsoever. And you float and float lightly, dancing and singing with no audio visuals. You're just being. That's what you're for, to be. I did have a brusque memory of my husband and children, of our house and friends and relatives. I absolutely knew, all caps, don't know how, but I sensed perfectly well that I simply knew that they'll be perfectly well, whether I'm with them or not. Next, I was supported by light pool waves that felt so gentle and caressing, like a mother's touch and a mother's love. I floated onward into a space that was endless and was neither too bright nor too dark. It was a place, though, without limits. Then I saw 7 and some more sheds of light beings moving towards me. We didn't have speech. We conversed, yet not a single vocal word was uttered. The very central being was my deceased mother-in-law, who told me they'd be keeping me company, for I was to return in a while. Her thought came into my being, and I could feel and see things through her mind and sensed exactly how she meant it. I told her I would so love for you to be with us and play with your grandchildren. She answered, "Don't worry at all. Before this child was born, we went together to all the gardens and lovely forests, and we laughed, played, and sang together. Besides, now that I'm here, I can protect you much stronger than if I were there, weak and ill." My aunt, father-in-law, and grandmothers were all there, yet the remaining ones weren't relatives I'd known from Earth. They were light beings I've known before being born into the earth. They guided me to a library. I placed this word inside quotation marks because it was a multidimensional composition. I cannot even call it a structure. Apparently, I had a quote unquote job up there and had left it quote unquote briefly when coming to Earth because I needed to experience certain things and learn certain things in order to be able to continue my work. There were stair-like features which we could move by the will of our minds. By the way, everything I'd learned, languages, subjects, nature observations while being on Earth, were absolutely useful up there. I had then floated onto my unfinished manuscript that looked like some form of tablet, except it would only appear by my mind's command. It had data from way before, but since I already knew it, I didn't even look back. I simply stared at it out of where my forehead is placed now that I'm human again. Appeared these strange characters, letters, round and perfect, a language I'd known seemingly eternally. By sheer thinking of these thoughts, these characters stamped themselves onto the manuscript. I cannot call these characters language, quote unquote, as we know it. One doesn't need to speak it or write it. It's simply a thought process. However, these thoughts I'd inserted into the manuscript had and served a great purpose, which as a light being I knew. However, back in my human body, I don't have a clue, as if there was a veil administered upon my return. There were many other light beings conducting similar work, and yet I knew that not every soul or light being is given such a task. Ours was a team destined to do this. Others were destined for other quote-unquote work. Time and space had no physicality, no validity. I'd call the whole thing as, all caps, freedom, the quote, all caps, perfect freedom, which every person I know aspires to, fights for, and dreams. The one thing I understand was that Aramaic and Armenian heritages hadn't happened to me just this one Earth lifetime, but several other times as well. It was as if I was in charge of moving this lineage of light beings. However, no notions of nationality or races or gender or political choices or kings or cultures held valid up there. Everything was filled with love and knowledge. Then I raised my head off the quote-unquote library as if by someone's gentle calling of my name. Someone was telling me, "Anna, I need for you to go back." That moment, I felt a piercing, earth-like sadness. I found myself far from the pool and the library, but looking at the planet Earth from the space cosmos. A light being had risen next to me, pointing at the planet, and a voice asking me, "Look there, the planet. What do you see?" I said, "I see planet Earth, and I don't want to go back. This is my home. Why are you sending me back there?" He soothingly calmed me. It was all sensory, no touches and no words. Then he asked me again with such a divine voice, an actual physical voice, "Look again. What do you see now?" All caps. Suddenly, I saw what the voice saw. I see our planet, and there are no borders dividing countries. The borders are gone. He said, "This is why you're going back. You have a mission." That's how I came back. I had a very difficult time afterwards trying to adjust. I was an avid reader before, but became even hungrier for knowledge, absorbing lots of information the entire time. I became more conscious of the environment, of clean air, clean water, world hunger, wars, and poverty. I grew such levels of empathy that at times it's hard not to feel the pain of another human being. I kept talking to representatives of various religions, and they hadn't much to say. The closest to explaining things I saw perhaps were most parts from the Vedas. Here's an open bracket, editor's note. The Vedas are the primary text of Hinduism, close bracket. I've been having out of body experiences, very sudden, usually at night, more frequent and intense than ever before. I do have certain extrasensory moments. However, I avoid working on them, or rather do not wish to get too deep into them. I do at times get nostalgic trying to figure out what quote unquote the mission was. But overall, it was the best thing I've ever experienced in my life here on Earth. Close quote. What an interesting story. When the mother-in-law told her that she don't worry that she already played with her child before he was born, and they went together to all the gardens and lovely forest, and we laughed, played, and sang together. That was pretty amazing. And then they went to the library, the library of heaven. We just talked about the library of heaven. And then she mentions that everything that she learned, languages, subjects, nature observations while being on Earth, were absolutely useful up there. Then she talked about her job. Didn't exactly understand that, but interesting that there's a job. And then her Aramaic and Armenian heritages. She's choosing those places and those, I don't know, maybe where she's recruited. Pretty interesting story. Thank you for listening.